something unimaginable just went down inside Buckingham Palace. In a shocking twist, the royal family confirmed a heartbreaking development that left the entire world reeling. The announcement came out of nowhere, shaking Britain to its core and sending waves of grief across every corner of the globe. For centuries, the palace has been a symbol of strength and continuity, but tonight, that image is shattered. The question everyone's asking is simple. What really went on behind those royal gates? Stick around as we dig into the full story of this tragic day that will change the monarchy forever. The morning started quietly, the kind of calm that fools you into thinking all is normal. The sun rose over Buckingham Palace, casting a soft gold glow over the courtyard as staff went about their usual routines. But something felt off. The palace rhythm, usually smooth and precise, hit a strange pause. Phones rang too early. Meetings disappeared from schedules. Senior aides moved fast, faces tight with tension. By mid-morning, unease hung heavy in the air like thick fog. Staff who normally exchanged polite smiles avoided eye contact. Emails were abandoned. Messages were delivered in person. The communications team, usually relaxed and visible, vanished behind locked doors. Outside, reporters noticed odd activity. Security vehicles rolled in clusters. Staff used side entrances rarely seen. Guards shifted positions without explanation. Something serious had gone down inside those walls. By noon, whispers leaked to the press. Journalists spoke carefully, sharing only fragments. One called it a significant development. Another said it was deeply troubling. Within an hour, speculation exploded. Social media blew up with rumors, each wilder than the last. Even veteran royal correspondents admitted they didn't know what was happening. Then, without warning, the royal website went offline. Moments later, it returned with the truth staring back, black text on a white background framed by the royal crest. The statement was short but heavy with history. A deeply distressing and heartbreaking development has occurred within the royal family. It expressed sorrow, thanked the public for their concern, and requested privacy as the family faced this unimaginable moment. No details, no explanations, just a quiet acknowledgement of tragedy. The impact was instant. TV anchors cut into live programming. Phones buzzed everywhere, offices, schools, homes. People stopped what they were doing to read it themselves. Crowds gathered at the palace gates, faces pale and silent. Reporters spoke in hushed tones as cameras caught the swelling sea of mourners. The guards remained at their posts, stillness now heavy with grief rather than discipline. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Staff who had served for decades said they had never seen the palace so still. Some were quietly sent away from certain areas, while others were told to stay put until further notice. Corridors that once buzzed with chatter now stretched endlessly, lined with unanswered questions and faces frozen in disbelief. By evening, the news had leaped far beyond Britain, from Washington to Sydney. Headlines screamed the same chilling words: tragedy in the palace. The world waited for more, but the palace stayed silent beyond that first statement. Behind those grand walls, history itself seemed to pause. The unthinkable had hit, and the heart of the monarchy would never beat the same again. A message wrapped in mourning appeared on the royal website. The world seemed to hold its breath. No warning, no heads up, just the sudden appearance of the royal crest and a few lines that would shatter the day. The statement was brief but devastating. Every word carried the weight of grief. It spoke of an event that shook the family to its core and left the nation in mourning. The tone was unlike anything the palace had ever released. Raw, trembling, human. Within minutes, TV programs across Britain were interrupted. Anchors spoke in solemn voices, faces pale and unsure. Networks read the statement aloud, filling homes and offices with disbelief. The words were calm, yet heavy, carefully crafted but unable to hide the sorrow beneath. The royal household, long seen as unshakable, suddenly sounded fragile. In just a few sentences, the monarchy revealed not only tragedy, but raw emotion, and the people felt it. Outside Buckingham Palace, mourning began to take shape. People arrived quietly, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Some carried paper-wrapped bouquets, others held photos of happier royal days. Many came with empty hands, standing unsure, trying to honor the moment. The air was cold, filled with quiet sobs and the soft hum of reporters speaking live to the world. Shops paused mid-transaction. Classrooms fell silent as teachers struggled to explain the unexplainable to wide-eyed children in small towns. People stepped outside just to hear the church bells toll in unison, their sound carrying across fields and streets alike, a haunting reminder of shared sorrow. Britain had mourned before, but this felt different, Immediate, collective, deeply personal. Social media exploded with emotion. Hashtags bearing the royals' names trended worldwide. Photos of Prince William and his family flooded timelines, paired with words of prayer and disbelief. Celebrities, politicians, and citizens all joined a growing chorus of compassion. Every corner of the globe echoed the same sentiment: heartbreak, unity, and grief. As darkness fell, the crowd outside the palace swelled. Candles flickered in the wind. Flowers covered the wet pavement. Handwritten messages were pinned to the gates. A mother held her daughter's hand as they placed a single rose among hundreds. Elderly couples stood silently, tears streaming down faces that had watched this family for generations. The palace lights glowed behind the iron gates, reflections dancing on the wet stone below. The announcement had shared no details, only raw emotion. And that alone shook a nation, a country so used to royal stoicism. This moment was different. For the first time in living memory, the monarchy and its people grieved together, not out of tradition, but from shared sorrow beneath the storm raging outside the palace gates. The reaction was instant, rising like a tidal wave before anyone could brace for it. Within minutes of the announcement, people began gathering outside Buckingham Palace. They came quietly at first, unsure what to do, drawn by an unspoken instinct to be near the heart of the tragedy. Some carried paper-wrapped flowers. Others brought photographs of the royal family. Many arrived empty-handed, faces pale with disbelief. Quiet sobs mixed with murmured voices. The click of cameras and shuffle of feet echoed on the rain-soaked pavement, from small towns to great cities across Britain. Time seemed to slow everywhere. Televisions flickered in living rooms. Radios whispered the same devastating words in classrooms. Teachers paused lessons, struggling to explain. Shops and offices fell silent. Strangers exchanged glances and whispered, "Have you heard?" By afternoon, the nation seemed suspended between shock and sorrow, unable to fully grasp the scale of what had been lost. Bells tolled from London cathedrals to tiny rural chapels rolling across fields and city streets. These tolls were not ordered by decree. They came from instinct, a shared mourning that transcended ceremony. People stepped outside, standing still as the notes carried on the wind. Each echo reminded everyone that grief respects no boundaries. Even distant hearts online felt it. Social media exploded with emotion. Images of palace gates, the royal crest, and family portraits flooded feeds. Hashtags with their names trended worldwide within minutes. Messages of condolence poured in from every continent, prayers, photographs from happier times, and countless notes simply saying they couldn't believe it. Public figures and world leaders joined ordinary citizens in a collective chorus of sorrow that seemed to span the globe. The crowd outside swelled into thousands. The cold wind carried the scent of flowers and candle wax. A little girl placed a single rose at the gate, her mother's tears falling silently beside her. Elderly couples held hands, gazing up at the palace windows as though waiting for reassurance that would never come. Police officers moved carefully through the crowd, guiding those who came to leave tributes. There was no noise of protest, no anger, only the quiet ache of shared loss. As evening fell, the palace stood illuminated behind the iron gates, golden lights glowing against the darkening sky. Reporters spoke softly, voices barely above a whisper, unsure how to describe what everyone already felt. The monarchy had always been seen as unshakable, a symbol of endurance and composure. Yet on this day, its walls seemed fragile. Its grandeur softened by grief, the silence, the tears, and the flicker of candles revealed the truth more clearly than any statement ever could. The storm outside the gates wasn't fury. It was heartbreak. Inside, the family's despair was heavy and almost tangible. Behind Buckingham Palace's glittering facade, order and protocol had given way to silence and sorrow. Those accustomed to control and composure had been reduced to grief. The atmosphere inside was so thick it felt almost physical, lingering in every corridor. Advisors walked quietly, voices hushed to whispers. Long-serving staff who had seen triumphs and crises alike were brought to tears in private corners. Even the guards, trained to remain expressionless, seemed weighed down by mourning. An emergency meeting was held in one of the palace's private chambers. Senior royals gathered beneath the cold shimmer of chandeliers, faces drawn and pale. Advisors outlined what little could be done, but no solutions could ease the pain. The king sat at the head of the table, motionless for most of the meeting. He said nothing, gaze fixed downward as though words had abandoned him. A lifetime spent mastering control, knowing a monarch must never waver, could not hold back this grief. On this day, he was not a king before his family, but a father, broken by loss. Queen Camilla sat beside him, hand resting gently on his arm, offering silent support. The room stayed silent long after the discussion ended. No one moved, no one dared to breathe too loudly. When the meeting dissolved, family members drifted away, footsteps echoing through long marble halls. Duty, always their anchor, offered no comfort now. What they faced wasn't statecraft, it was raw, unshielded loss. And elsewhere in the palace, Prince William and Princess Kate moved quietly through the day. William, raised within these walls, was said to be shattered, but focused on shielding his children from the weight pressing down on their home. Kate, steadfast as ever, held the family together with quiet strength. They were seen briefly at a window overlooking the courtyard, silhouettes framed by fading afternoon light, staring into the distance with exhaustion and disbelief. Messages of condolence poured in from around the world. Heads of state, celebrities, and ordinary citizens alike sent words of love and sympathy. Inside the palace, time felt frozen. Footsteps had vanished, meals went untouched, and even the ticking of clocks seemed louder than usual. Staff who had served through decades whispered they had never seen such stillness, such heartbreak. As night fell over London, palace lights dimmed one by one. The king stayed in solitude, declining briefings and visitors alike. Buckingham Palace, long a symbol of strength and endurance, had become something far more human, a house in mourning. Behind its walls, the family that carried a nation's hopes could do nothing but grieve, not as royals bound by duty, but as a father, a mother, and children facing a loss too deep for words. For Prince William, this tragedy wasn't just a test of duty, it was the breaking point. Those close to him had noticed the signs weeks before the announcement. Public appearances grew fewer, smiles more strained, voice quieter. He still showed up, shaking hands, leading because that's what was expected. But beneath the calm surface, something inside him began to crack. The weight of expectation, the pressure of leadership, and the pain of personal loss had finally become too much to bear. When the news broke, William reportedly spent hours alone in his study at Adelaide Cottage, away from cameras and advisors. Phones rang constantly, messages from dignitaries and family flooding in. But for a time, he answered none. He sat in silence, staring over the gardens where his children often played, trying to process the reality that had crashed into his life. For a man who spent adulthood balancing father, husband, and future king, the moment was both surreal and unbearable. Those who know him say he has always carried emotions quietly. From an early age, he learned the public watches not just what royals say, but how they appear. Composure became his armor, a shield forged over decades of scrutiny. Yet this time, the armor cracked. When he appeared before cameras later that day, his eyes were red, his expression pale. No rehearsed smile, no polished tone. The nation didn't see a prince to the throne. They saw a man standing on the edge of grief. Princess Kate stood beside him, steady and graceful, her hand brushing his occasionally, lending strength. Her presence anchored him, reminding him that even in despair, they were not alone. Together, they faced the cameras, voices trembling as they spoke. William thanked the public for their kindness and compassion. His words were deliberate but heavy with emotion. He paused several times, gaze lowering as if continuing was almost too much. When he asked for space for his family to grieve, it wasn't a formal royal request. It was the plea of a husband and father trying to protect those he loved most. After their brief appearance, William and Kate returned to Windsor, where the world's eyes could no longer reach them. The palace released a short note. The couple would step back temporarily from public duties. Behind closed doors, William spent the evening with his children, keeping routines normal to shield them from the storm outside. Yet even in that effort, the ache was visible. The boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin now faced another heartbreak, this time as a man carrying both a crown and an unbearable weight of loss. In that moment, the world saw not a future king, but a human being pushed to the edge. Holding his family close, he drew strength from the only place left to look: love. For King Charles, the tragedy was not just a national crisis, it was deeply personal. The monarch, who had spent a lifetime preparing to lead, now faced a collision of duty and heartbreak within Buckingham Palace's solemn walls. He walked the long corridors in silence, thoughts torn between the responsibilities of a ruler and the grief of a father. The country looked to him for strength and reassurance, yet inside, He mourned alongside his family. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier. Advisors held hushed meetings, urging him to address the nation. Every prepared speech felt too formal, too hollow. How could he speak as a monarch when his heart was breaking as a man? He sat at his desk, crossing out lines written for him, crafting new ones in his own hand. The final version no longer sounded like the voice of a king. It was the voice of a father trying to make sense of loss. As night fell, the palace prepared for the broadcast. Cameras were brought into one of its oldest rooms, lined with gold frames and velvet curtains. The king sat at a polished wooden desk, dressed in black, hands clasped tightly. For a long moment, he closed his eyes before the broadcast began. Those in the room said the silence was almost unbearable. When the red light blinked on, he lifted his head and spoke. His voice was soft, unsteady, but painfully sincere. Gone were rehearsed tones. He spoke from the heart. He thanked the nation for its compassion, acknowledged the depth of its grief, and admitted that even a king could struggle to find words for such sorrow. "We are all, in the end, human," he said quietly, pausing to steady his voice. That simple line echoed across living rooms, filling televisions and radios with a weight no speechwriter could craft. The world stopped to listen. Families sat together in silence, screens glowing in dark rooms, pubs, hospitals, and cafes across Britain. People leaned closer, faces lit by the broadcast. For the first time in generations, the monarchy's barrier of distance fell away. The king had revealed not the crown, but the man beneath it. When the address ended, there was no applause, only quiet reflection outside the palace. Thousands stood in the cold, some crying, others holding candles that flickered against the night. The king's words hadn't erased the pain, but they had done something greater. They had united a nation through shared humanity. In the days that followed, his message lingered like a gentle echo. King Charles appeared solemn, yet steadfast, carrying the nation's sorrow with quiet grace. In that moment, he reminded Britain that true strength isn't found in grandeur or ceremony, but in compassion, in the courage to show that even kings can break. As the days passed, the shock that gripped the nation slowly gave way to questions. People wanted to understand what really happened behind the gates of Buckingham Palace. The silence after the king's speech only deepened curiosity, and whispers began surfacing in newsrooms and across social media. Slowly, carefully, fragments of truth emerged. The palace confirmed the tragedy wasn't about scandal, politics, or power. It was far more personal. It wasn't about image, duty, or position. It was about loss, a loss that cut deep into the heart of the royal family and left scars that would never fully heal. Those who saw the family in the days before the announcement spoke of exhaustion. Prince William, once steady and composed, appeared distant. Princess Kate, known for her poise, seemed unusually quiet. Courtiers described a tension lingering in palace corridors, behind walls where royal life had always been orderly and rehearsed. A private storm was brewing. For years, the weight of duty had been pressing down on every member of the family. Every appearance, every smile, every carefully worded statement came at a cost. When the truth finally came out, it was devastatingly simple. A personal loss, profound and unexpected, had struck the core of the family. Something uncontrollable that stripped away ceremony and left only raw humanity. Those close to the royals said grief moved through the palace like a shadow, touching everyone from the highest-ranking aides to the newest staff. The tragedy not only broke hearts, but exposed how fragile the balance between duty and personal life had become. Royal observers reflected on the years leading to this moment. Endless scrutiny, public pressure, impossible expectations. The monarchy had always projected stability, but behind the facade, cracks had been forming. The pressure to remain perfect, to honor tradition while evolving with the times, had created a quiet suffering few outside those walls could understand. When the devastating event occurred, it was as if those cracks finally split open for all of Britain to see. Upon learning the truth, people responded not with anger or gossip, but with compassion. The tragedy was too human, too universal to be treated as spectacle. Parents who had lost children, siblings holding one another together. Anyone who had felt heartbreak saw themselves reflected in the royal family's pain. The realization that even a family so often seen as unshakable could suffer drew the nation closer than ever. As the palace continued to request privacy, one message began to resonate across the country. The monarchy, for all its grandeur, was made up of people no different from anyone else. Crowns and titles could not shield them from the weight of sorrow. The truth behind the tragedy wasn't scandal or mystery. It was something painfully familiar. Even in palaces, hearts can break, and no power can protect a family from loss. All across the United Kingdom, a hush fell over daily life. It began in London, where the usually bustling streets near Buckingham Palace became silent avenues of grief. Strangers stood side by side, united by sorrow, eyes fixed on the palace gates, now a symbol of loss. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of roses and rain, yet no one moved away. Some wept openly, while others simply stared in disbelief. The tragedy that struck the royal family no longer felt theirs alone. It belonged to the nation. The same scenes unfolded across Britain. In Edinburgh, mourners gathered outside Holyrood Palace, placing Scottish thistles among bouquets of lilies. In Cardiff, cathedral bells tolled through narrow streets as candles glowed in church courtyards. In Belfast, crowds stood silently outside government buildings, holding photographs of the royal family. With the Union Jack at half-mast, it felt as if the entire United Kingdom had taken a collective breath and forgotten how to exhale. Cathedrals and churches opened their doors, offering quiet spaces for reflection. Long lines formed outside St. Paul's and Westminster Abbey, candlelight flickering against ancient walls in gold. Inside, people of all ages knelt together, some to pray, others simply to sit in stillness. Clergy spoke softly of compassion, shared humanity, and the power of grief to unite. The message reached far beyond religion. It didn't matter whether people believed or not. The loss had touched something deeper, something human. Even those who had long doubted the monarchy found themselves mourning in pubs, classrooms, and offices. Conversations shifted from politics to empathy. People spoke not of crowns or titles, but of a family that had given everything and lost something profound. No title could replace the monarchy. Once distant, the family now appeared heartbreakingly real. There was no divide between loyalists and critics, only shared sorrow. Generations came together in ways not seen for years. Elderly citizens who remembered Queen Elizabeth II's coronation stood beside young people who had grown up seeing William and Kate as symbols of modern hope. Parents lifted their children onto their shoulders so they could glimpse the palace gates, quietly explaining that they were witnessing a moment history would never forget. The tragedy erased age, class, and belief. It united millions in compassion. Across towns and villages, vigils burned through the night. Candlelight reflected in puddles, and hymns drifted softly through the air. Some left toys and letters written in a child's hand. Others tied ribbons to fences in royal colors, fluttering gently in the breeze. For the first time in years, the United Kingdom felt like one family. The grief was vast, but shared. And in that unity, there was something quietly healing. The loss reminded the nation that beyond ceremony, power, and history, the royals were human, and so were those who mourned them. Days turned into nights, and the palace remained silent. The Union Jack hung at half-mast, unmoving even in the wind, as if the nation itself had paused outside the gates. The sea of flowers grew taller, spilling across the pavement in a mosaic of color and sorrow. Photographs of the royal family, faded or freshly printed, nestled among bouquets. Candles flickered despite the drizzle, wax pooling over stone, each one whispering a prayer, not just for what was lost, but for what lay ahead. Britain mourned, but it also waited, waiting for a sign, a word, a glimpse of what the future would bring inside Buckingham Palace. Time moved differently within the walls. Vast halls, usually alive with movement and ceremony, had fallen nearly silent. Footsteps echoed where laughter once lingered. The king stayed mostly out of sight, appearing briefly for meetings before retreating to private quarters. Prince William and Princess Kate withdrew entirely, spending time with their children away from the public eye. For the first time in generations, the monarchy had vanished from view, hidden behind walls of grief. The public began to ask the question no one wanted to say aloud. What happens now? Newspapers printed headlines filled with speculation about the crown's future. Political commentators debated the stability of the institution. Royal experts spoke cautiously of transitions and the uncertain path ahead for a monarchy that had always symbolized permanence. Yet, beneath the questions, a quiet understanding began to grow. The tragedy had changed everything. The monarchy, long regarded as the steadfast heart of the nation, had revealed something profound. Centuries of guarding its humanity had fallen away. The pain etched across the faces of the royal family stripped away the illusion of untouchable grandeur, showing the world the human truth beneath the crown. For once, the crown didn't feel eternal or distant. It felt fragile, real, and profoundly human. This was a moment of reckoning for an institution built on tradition. Could a monarchy that showed emotion still command the reverence of its people? Or was this the start of a new kind of legacy, one built not on ceremony, but on connection across the country? Conversations shifted from grief to reflection in homes and cafes. People spoke softly about the future. Some felt the tragedy had made the royals more relatable, while others feared the pain might forever alter the balance between duty and family. The uncertainty hung in the air like mist, touching everyone who had followed the story with heavy hearts. As night fell over London, the palace lights glowed faintly through the fog. Footsteps faded, leaving only the low murmur of the crowd beyond the gates. In that stillness, a truth settled over the nation. Crowns may symbolize power, but beneath them beat hearts that can break, just like anyone else's. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear. The future of the monarchy would be shaped not by tradition alone, but by its humanity. The world had finally seen it. Buckingham Palace stood silent tonight, lights dim against the London sky, yet the echoes of this tragedy stirred hearts across the globe. The story of the royal family has always been about duty and endurance, but this moment revealed something far deeper, the fragile humanity beneath the crown. As Britain looks to the future, one question remains: can love and unity rebuild what has been broken? The world will be watching, and so will history. If you watch this and have thoughts, drop them in the comments below. If this breakdown made you see things differently, hit subscribe and stay locked in for more deep dives like this. Don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who needs to see it.